Wrestling Podcast. Oh, I did that too soon. Hi, everybody. This is Masha Slamovich, and you're watching the Nerds of Wrestling Podcast.
What is going on, Nerds of Wrestling, and welcome to another episode of What's Up Wrestler on the Nerds of Wrestling podcast. My guest at this very time is Masha Slamovich. Masha, what is going on? How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. I just came from the gym, and I'm ready to go hit up another gym. So that's how it's going.
That is awesome. How was your workout? How was the gym?
It was splendid. It was one of those workouts where you're just suffering the whole way through, but it's that good feeling. I love that shit.
It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. I don't go to the gym, so I can't relate. I think I should start going. In due time though. I always ask this question in the start of the podcast. It's just kind of an icebreaker. How are you doing during this whole craziness that we're living in right now?
You know, there were hard times, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that at times when we were all down and everything sucked and we hated everything. But at the end of the day, you got to use that hatred and that drive to fuel you forward, to get better, to progress, and to evolve. And that's exactly what I did. I took that burning sensation of hate for COVID and I turned it into something good. And that's what I aim to do every day.
A lot of people kind of seem to really use it as a positive. Like last year, I know a lot of wrestlers are doing their thing now, and last year they took advantage of the time that they were going through, and it's really showing for their work right now. If I'm not mistaken, you were in Japan before.
Yes, that's correct. I was there all of 2020, honestly, pretty much.
Well, how was that?
It was awesome, staying there for what I thought was going to be 3 months, and then it turned out to be a year. It was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. For years, I would say to my friends that I wanted to go back to Japan ever since I was there in 2016. And then being able to go back and live there for a year and wrestle was phenomenal. And just training all the time, it was amazing.
To be in Japan, how were you able to kind of get your foot in the door into Japan for their wrestling promotion?
So with Marvelous, what happened was I did a tryout when they came to the United States, and they chose me from the tryout. And from there on, it's history. I went over to Japan and began to do my work in wrestling and so on.
There's so much wrestling nowadays. It's to the point where it's overwhelming. Are you keeping up with any of the current products? ROH, New Japan, Raw, SmackDown, AEW, NXT?
I was keeping up with New Japan very closely when I was over in Japan. Now I've been super busy since I've came back to the United States. So I've just been, trying my best to keep up with little tidbits, but I haven't really been keeping up with anything current. I'm just studying, whatever I study for my wrestling purposes of the day.
Right. There's not much you're missing, honestly. You're always gonna catch it online on Twitter, on Facebook. So I mean, you should watch it if you have cable, but I don't watch it, and I just keep up with it on the internet. What really motivated you to become a wrestler? Who were some wrestlers that you looked up to growing up?
what motivated me to be a wrestler, I just saw wrestling on TV when I was a little kid. I was like 3 years old or something. And I just fell in love with it, and I never even imagined any other journey for myself that wasn't pro wrestling. So the second that I could train, I started to train, chase the dream, put in the work. And when I was a kid, I very much was a fan of Chris Benoit. I was a fan of like the Dynamite Kid, the Undertaker. There was a lot, but I definitely say Chris Benoit would be like the standout of someone who I would, be inspired by or something like that.
Was your whole family into it, or was it just you?
Not at all. My family to this day could care less about wrestling. They probably know, like my mom just knows of like Undertaker and Edge, and that's it. And me, like that's my dad doesn't even. I don't think he's ever watched a match in his life that wasn't mine.
What? Really?
Yeah, my parents are not into like sports whatsoever. The only person my grandfather liked boxing and wrestling, but aside from him, nobody.
When you told your parents that you want to wrestle, were they like, okay, cool, or were they kind of concerned?
They were like, they thought I was crazy, and they thought it was a ridiculous career choice. They're like, yeah, when are you going to get over it and go to school? But I think that ship has sailed, and they finally understand that I'm not about to change my career, and they're finally like coming along to the idea of me doing this for as long as I can.
That's awesome. I loved how you mentioned, those wrestlers that you looked up to growing up. Chris Benoit, Undertaker, Dynamite Kid. What were some matches that really of theirs that really, just got you hooked to them personally?
I think it was less of like, oh, that was a really good match thing to get me hooked onto them. I think it was their like aura and persona. Regarding Chris Benoit, definitely. I mean, what matches of his can I name that are bad? So let's talk
Honestly,
about that, right? And
right.
pretty much the same with like the Undertaker and everyone else. I'm like, if I may say so, I think I have some good wrestling picks who know what they're doing in the ring.
Right, right. One match that I always go back to when I look at, one match is I'm assuming that you love as well is WrestleMania 25 Taker versus Shawn Michaels. Such a such a classic match, such a
Oh,
gem. Their match at 26 was excellent too, but were you more of a fan of 25 or 26? I know that's kind of a hard question that people are asked.
just like you said, I was gonna definitely bring up the 125, 26. That is a tough one. I am inclined to say 25, so I guess I'm gonna go with that at the moment. But you
Right.
never know. I might change my opinion next week.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. I mean, 25 is mine right now, and then tomorrow it could be 26. Yeah, opinions always change on wrestling. When you first decided that I'm gonna be a wrestler, this is what I'm gonna do. Where did you train? How long did it take you? And what was your mindset going in to the wrestling ring for the first time and taking those bumps and running the ropes?
So I started training with Johnny Rods in Brooklyn, New York, when I was 16 years old. Before I debuted, I trained for about a year and a half, just training like every single day. I'm not even joking, like every day. Um, I remember the first time I ever got to step into the ring, like my very first day of training. And I just remember that it was such an honor for me to even step into a pro wrestling ring, knowing every like the little things that I knew about it, but I knew enough to like be respectful of the ring and like pro wrestling and love the art. And I was just so honored to, step in and be a part of that world and see where the journey would take me.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Like just it must have been like a you must have felt like a kid in a candy store stepping foot into the ring for the first time. What was that first back bump like? Because I interviewed a lot of wrestlers and they always say it hurt. They go, oh, it felt great. They go like, oh no, this is awesome. This is where I belong. Was that the same mindset for you?
I never had any kind of idea aside from I'm going to do my best and see where this goes. I never had any inclination thinking like, oh, I'm going to be one of the greatest, but I just knew that I was going to do whatever it took to make something of myself, and I never saw any way out. You know, taking my first back bump, I mean, it was atrocious. Like, it didn't hurt, but it sucked, obviously. And you know, I knew it was bad, so I was like, hey, let me try again. And it took me a while to get it, but it takes everyone a while to get it, you know.
I don't think anybody's first back bump was perfect. Because I mean, I'm not a wrestler. I know for a back bump, you got to land straight in your back, and I'm assuming for a lot of wrestlers, the first time they, fell on their ass and then their back, or they just fell right in their butt and they couldn't get up. Like, is that it? No, that's not it. You gotta do it again. Was your trainer like, okay, that's good. Now do it again?
They were questioning whether I should even bump. I remember because I know having an athletic background, I got the rolls down really fast, and like to this day, I'm always really good at new rolls. So I got like the rolls, and the roll downs were a little weird, and then they said, okay, let's try a bump. And I'm pretty sure I like landed on my elbows, and it was just bad. So they tried to correct me, like, oh, fix your elbows, fix your back, whatever this. And after a couple of like weeks, I'm sure it was better.
That's there you go. It took practice, right? But you said you went into you trained every single day. How long do you think it took you to really perfect the back bump?
um I know I remember when I started training, like at first I would just come during like the class hours, and I would only stay, like I would, because being 16, I was coming from high school, and I would tell my parents like, yeah, I'll be home by 9 today, or like I'll be home at 10. And then it turned into like, I'll be home at 2 a.m. Don't stay up because I'm going to
Mm.
be in the gym. And, it just consumed my life. I don't remember how long it took me to perfect the back bump, but I do remember a specific day where I was there early on a Saturday by myself, just me and one of the coaches, and I would just take a roll, do a back bump, and then do it again and again and again and again. And I think we went for like an hour and a half of me just doing it and doing it.
Oh
And my
God.
coach said, until you do 10 of them in a row perfectly, the roll and the bump, you're not getting out of this ring. And then I guess I did 10 that were acceptable. And he just looks at me. He's like, all right, you can get water and get back in. We're going to start like, shoot wrestling or something. I'm like, I was always down for it. I was always like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to wrestle. Let me just get my little sip of water and let's go.
That's awesome. So it must have felt pretty good to finally have those back bumps like finally like perfected.
I'm pretty sure after that day, if you wake me up at 3 in the morning, I'll just roll and bump perfectly for you straight out of bed. And that's how it should be. It's muscle memory. It has to be in your body and not even here.
Right, right. For so how did Masha Slamovich really become Masha Slamovich after your training was done? How long did it take you to finally take some bookings? Because I know you had a lot of matches, and I saw a lot of matches on YouTube. I'm like, holy shit, I can't watch all these. Like, what? How long did it take you to train, and when did you take your first booking? What was that like, and what are some of your favorite matches that you had? I know there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it's hard for me to remember all that. But so my debut story is a little strange. So there was Japanese scouts that came, and I had my pro wrestling debut in Tokyo, wrestling for Reina Pro Wrestling, which was the company I was with at the time. So I was there for a month and a half wrestling for Reina Pro Wrestling Wave and Diana Pro Wrestling. And then I would come back to the United States and I would start taking indie bookings. I remember I started at Bronx Wrestling Federation, and then I went to like CZW, WSU, and then it was like East Coast Pro Wrestling and stuff in like Sanctuary. It was just a bunch of like random, when you start out, you take bookings anywhere. So that's pretty much
Right.
what it was back then, after I came back from Japan.
What was it like? I know you wrestled in Japan a lot, but like to make your debut in Japan, that must have been pretty historic and pretty nerve wracking.
It was an incredible feeling. I remember standing behind the curtain and getting ready to go out. It was a 6-man tag match. And I always have worked well under pressure, and I still do. So I felt that that was the culmination of all of my training. And, I was wrestling for myself, wrestling for my country, wrestling to representing Johnny Rods. So I knew I had to go out there, and do my best, even though I was clearly not going to be great because it was my first match. But man, for my first match, I think I did all right.
Was your first match a singles match? Was it a tag match? Battle royal?
No, it was a 6-man tag match.
Okay, 6 man. To wrestle in Japan, like I said, is historic and absolutely amazing. When you're stepping foot into the ring with a Japanese wrestler, how's that language barrier? Like, how's the communication in the ring? Is it hard? Is it easy? What was it like your first time?
To me, it like there was obviously a language barrier, but it wasn't like impossible to work around it. Like after like 30 minutes, everything would be figured out somehow because you could just work around it, and you also work with like physical motions and stuff like that. And once you learn the different words, for example, like instead of a suplex, like a vertical suplex
Right.
over there, we call it a brain buster, and you got to figure out which one. You know what I mean?
No
So
shit.
when you make it past those when you make it past those barriers, it's pretty easy to figure it out. And in the very beginning of my career, I clearly started doing stuff in Japan with a language barrier, and then working with Johnny Rods, I would work with a lot of people from CMLL and from AAA, which also had a language barrier with
Right.
Spanish. So by the time I started doing anything speaking English, like it was easy for me. I'm like, shit, at least I don't gotta like translate.
I felt like you were like thrown in like the deep end of the water there. Like, holy shit, like you're debuting in Japan, you're wrestling these AAA wrestlers, these all these other wrestlers. That's insane. Like, cause you normally usually you'll just get booked at your school and then or where you trained at their promotion, then you just wrestle there. But you were like just right into Japan. That's absolutely incredible. Do you see yourself going back to Japan at all after this whole pandemic is over?
100%. As soon as the borders open, I still am in good contact with Marvelous Pro Wrestling. So, they were trying to get me over there right now, but with COVID and the borders, it's a little weird. But the second I'm able to go back there, I'm 100% ready to go back to Japan. I love it there. I can't wait to go back. Japan is like the mecca of pro wrestling.
Of course, I always wanted to go to Japan, but money and COVID, and I never traveled outside the country before, so that's like taking a big step for me. Like, I'll go to Japan eventually. I want to go to New Japan, Wrestle Kingdom. That's what I want to go for. Uh, I'm assuming you've been to Wrestle Kingdom, before.
I haven't actually. Every
No.
time it's there, I'm always there at like a weird time. Like I arrived right after Wrestle Kingdom
Oh,
last year, and I was in Japan for this past Wrestle Kingdom, but I think I was in like Osaka or something like that day. Or
oh, damn, that's I could have sworn I'm like, oh, Masha's probably been to Wrestle Kingdom plenty of times before. That
no,
sucks. Oh.
there's so many things that like you would think that I've done in Japan, and it's just like weird timing, and it just doesn't work out. I'm like,
Well, hopefully once this whole COVID is over and once hopefully the borders open back up, you go to Japan, you get to witness Wrestle Kingdom because I feel like that's every wrestling fan's dream is WrestleMania and Wrestle Kingdom. Big wrestling fans, not just straight WWE fans. I'm talking about like mega wrestling fans like you, like me, like everyone else who's watching and listening. There's so much wrestling though in the independents right now. I know you do a lot for Mission Pro Wrestling in Texas. Is that your sister? Is that your home promotion? I know you're based off in Texas, right?
well, I'm actually currently in San Antonio
Okay.
because I was with Mission Pro Wrestling last weekend, and as well as with RWR. But I am normally based out of New York City. But like you said, I travel a lot, I work a lot, so you never know. I might be in El Paso next week. I might be in Boston. You never know where I am. I don't even know where I'm gonna be a month from now. So
You get booked last minute. Oh, everyone wants Masha. Tell us a little bit about Mission Pro. Because I have a funny story about Mission Pro Wrestling. Really quick, I'll tell. So last night, as we're recording this podcast, on March 24th, Mission Mission Pro Wrestling, excuse me, Mission Pro Wrestling tweeted out, "Who do you want to see at Mission Pro Wrestling?" Every time I see like a tweet about that, I always tag wrestlers I know, men, guys, girls, whoever. I'll tag everybody, right? I didn't know Mission Pro Wrestling was a all female promotion. I was like, oh, oh. So I'm tweeting like 20 guys, 20 girls. I'm getting a bunch of retweets and likes. Everyone's saying thank you for tweeting me. I was like, of course. And then somebody messaged me and they go, yeah, Justin, Mission Pro is all female promotion. So why are you tagging all these guys? I'm like, oh, I
Whoopsie.
didn't. So I had to delete that tweet and I had to try it again this morning. And I didn't make a mistake. I tagged all females this time. No guys. Thank God. So yeah, now I know. I know Mission Pro Wrestling. I just didn't know they were all female. So my
Well, now
bad.
you know. Better late than never.
Yeah, my bad. My bad. But honestly though, I feel like Texas has so many big female wrestling talent up there, especially because of Mission Pro Wrestling. How were you introduced to Mission Pro Wrestling? When were you first booked up there?
So, two things before I touch base on the Mission Pro thing. You mentioned that, Texas is full of the good female talent
Right.
or whatever. And you are indeed right. And if I'm going to shout out one person on this podcast, that's going to be Roxy, because every time I run into her, she's such a pleasure to be around. And I watched her match this Friday at RWR, and it just put a giant smile on my face. Every time I see her work, it just makes me happy. So I just want to say that Roxy's kicking ass, and I really think she's going to do a lot of great things in the future.
She's so good. She's very young and she has a very bright future ahead of her. So yeah, no, shout out to Roxy.
Yeah, absolutely. But, anyways, regarding Mission Pro, I actually got brought into Mission Pro by Mission Pros and my own sponsor, Gorilla Press. They were the ones who hooked me up with Mission Pro Wrestling. They made the connection. And ever since then, that's how this whole thing started with me in Texas through Gorilla Press. First in Mission Pro at February 6th or something, was it? And now March 20th. And that all like cascaded into now me having like Texas bookings every week. So shout out to Gorilla Press to bringing me into Mission Pro.
Shout out to Gorilla Press. They are watching and thank you so much, Gorilla Press, for tuning in on this podcast. Other than Mission Pro, I know you wrestled for, I don't want to name all the promotions, but Limitless is one promotion that I definitely got to give a big shout out to for, Randy Carver. Limitless Wrestling is absolutely insane. How were you introduced to Limitless? Kind of like, was it the same way as uh Mission Pro, where someone brought you in, or did the promoter just hit you up and like, hey, we want you to come to Limitless?
Man, Limitless is like one of my favorite places to work. I I remember back in maybe like September or something, I wrote Randy from Limitless, and I did my first match there with Davian. It was on Let's Wrestle, which is their like
Sister
baby promotion.
promotion. Yeah.
It's like under. And then like it was like 2 weeks later or something, they hit me up. They're like, "Hey, we want to bring you into Limitless," which I wasn't expecting, but I was obviously very happy with that. And that was I think it was like the around Halloween time that we did that show, because it was a like a 5-way women's match, and Jeremy Leary was like dressed as a cop, and it was
Yeah.
great fun. Jody Threat was there with her skateboard. We had Alley Cat there, Ashley Vox. It was a nice mix, and every time I work for Limitless, it's always some kind of good pairing. It's good matches, and I look forward to being back at Limitless whenever whenever. We don't know where the future is going.
Limitless is doing their thing right now. I don't know if you know, but I'm assuming you do. Daniel Garcia, he just beat Casanova for the title this past Friday at Double Vision. So Daniel Garcia is the new Limitless champion. He's a god. Daniel Garcia, man, he's a workhorse. So is Casanova. Shout out to Casanova for getting signed. But there's so many wrestlers out there who are trying to get their names out there. Who are some names that you want to wrestle? But also, there's so many shows. And what are some shows and promotions that you would like to work for?
Oh, that puts me on the spot.
That's
Like,
that's what we're all about. We gotta put you on the
like,
spot.
I mean, what I would be ridiculous if I didn't say AEW. I know Zelo Pro is coming back. I know Warriors is coming back.
Yep.
I know JCW is coming back. So there's a whole bunch of promotions I can name off the top of my head that are all coming back. And yeah, there we go. That's all I can remember for you guys right now. That's all you get.
It's all good. Once this whole thing is over, I hope to meet you one day in person. This is my first time talking to you, and it's funny because I know I was trying to get you on this podcast for a solid year. I think I just felt so bad. Like every time I hit you up, hey, you want to do a podcast? You were busy, or I was busy. So I'm finally glad we are finally able to make this happen, though. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Like this happens to me all the time, where it's just like I'm busy, they're busy, we never make it work. So there you go. We finally found the time
We
that
finally
we can
found
go through this.
we finally found the time. Yes. Masha, thank you so much again. Really quick though, drop those plugs. Where can the nerds find you?
Hey y'all can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Masha Slamovich. And for all of the good content, for all the stuff that I'm doing in San Antonio right now, I haven't been posting a lot on my Instagram of what I'm actually doing. Come up to my Patreon, patreon.com/Masha Slamovich. That's got all the updates of what I'm doing in my life, all the exclusive content, discounts on merch, first dibs on everything. Patreon.com/Masha Slamovich. And there is a sale on ProWrestlingTees.com with the code Dynamite. How fitting, because I'm the Russian Dynamite, right? So check that out. 20% off all my t-shirts. That's live on ProWrestlingTees.com right now.
All right, nerds, you heard it from the lady herself, Masha Slamovich. Go give her a follow on Patreon. Go buy her merch on Pro Wrestling Tees, and be sure to follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Masha Slamovich. This has been an episode of What's Up Wrestler, a podcast by Nerds of Wrestling. I am your host, Justin Del Rio.